Gracie Abrams was supposed to make another soft pop album. Instead, she made her most controversial record yet, and somehow turned that controversy into a #1. Gracie Abrams had just spent an entire year riding the wave of The Secret of Us, opening for Taylor Swift in front of millions of people and becoming one of the biggest names in modern singer-songwriting pop. So the obvious move would have been to make everything bigger, shinier, and more commercial, but Gracie Abrams did the opposite. Her team striped away the gloss, leaned into the criticism surrounding her, built an intentionally cold visual identity, and turned her personal story into the centerpiece of the campaign. And on July 17, that strategy paid off with Daughter from Hell becoming Gracie Abrams' first #1 album on the Billboard 200, alongside massive global streaming numbers and a rollout designed around something much harder to manufacture than virality: emotional investment. Welcome back to LabelGrid, where we break down the strategies, campaigns, and business decisions shaping the modern music industry. I'm Val, and today we're looking at one of the most interesting pop rollouts of 2026, Gracie Abrams and Daughter from Hell. Because this isn't just a story about a #1 album, it's a story about what happens when an artist stops trying to outrun the narrative people have created around them and starts using that narrative as creative material. Today, we're breaking down the branding problem Gracie had to solve, the emotional architecture behind the album, the frictionless digital funnel, the collaborations that created cultural credibility, and the way her team turned criticism into fuel. So, if you're an artist, manager, label, or just someone interested in how major music campaigns actually work behind the scenes, let's get into it. Don't forget to subscribe into our channel. Gracie Abrams had a narrative to escape. Before Gracie Abrams could sell Daughter from Hell, she had to sell people on Gracie Abrams herself, and that was a harder marketing problem. To understand why this campaign worked, we first have to understand the problem Gracie Abrams was facing. Every artist has what I like to call a narrative tax. It's the story the public has already decided about you, whether you like it or not. And for Gracie, that narrative was complicated. On one side, there was the Hollywood nepo baby conversation. Gracie is the daughter of the filmmaker J.J. Abrams, and that fact has followed her throughout her career. On the other side, there was the comparison to Taylor Swift. After opening for Taylor and becoming increasingly associated with that ecosystem, some people began reducing Gracie's identity to being a softer, younger extension of something that already existed. And then there was the criticism of the music itself. Some critics saw her understand production and intimate songwriting as emotionally repetitive or too restrained. So from a traditional marketing perspective, you might think the solution would have been obvious. Make the next album bigger, more production, bigger singles, more spectacle, more pop. But Gracie Abrams' team made a very different decision. They went anti-gloss. Instead of trying to make her look less vulnerable, they made vulnerability the entire foundation of the era. And that's where the title Daughter from Hell becomes so important. The title immediately confronts the family narrative that has followed Gracie throughout her career. Rather than pretending that her background doesn't exist, she transforms it into a piece of her artistic identity. In interviews and short-form content around the release, Gracie explained that the title track was connected to her relationship with her mother and the intensity of adolescence. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't simply, she's J.J. Abrams' daughter. It became, what does it actually mean to be someone's daughter? That is a much more interesting story. And this is the first major lesson from the campaign. You don't always defeat a narrative by denying it. Sometimes you defeat it by owning it so completely that you control the meaning. Gracie Abrams didn't just promote an album, she built a psychological funnel that turned one emotional reaction into a pre-save, a stream, and eventually a fan. Now let's get into the actual mechanics of the rollout, because this is where Daughter from Hell becomes much more interesting from a marketing perspective. The campaign was built around 3 major ideas: reduce friction, create physical world conversation, and make every piece of content feel like part of the same story. First, frictionless conversion. When the album was revealed, Spotify countdown pages went live immediately, and that sounds like a small operational detail, but these little details can completely change a campaign performance. Think about what happens when a fan sees something exciting on Instagram. They see an announcement, they get curious, they want to hear the album. Then you give them a link, they click it, the link opens a browser, maybe they have to log in, maybe they have to find it on Spotify, maybe they get distracted, maybe they forget. Every additional step creates an opportunity for that emotional moment to disappear. Instead, the campaign created a direct pathway from discovery to commitment. Fans could interact with the album inside the streaming ecosystem, see the track list, pre-save the project, and immediately become part of the release cycle. That's not just convenience, that's conversion design. But Gracie Abrams' team also understood something equally important. Digital attention becomes much more powerful when you give it a physical object to attach itself to. That's where the Outdoor campaign came in. Stark, minimal billboards appear across strategic cities. They didn't necessarily look like traditional advertisements. They looked like pieces of the album world that had escaped into the real world. And what happens when fans see something mysterious in their city? They take a picture, they post it, they tag their friends, they speculate about it. Suddenly, the billboard isn't just advertising the album, the audience is advertising it for you. That creates a physical to digital loop. The artist puts something into the real world. Fans document it online. And that online conversation sends even more people back toward the artist. And then you have the singles. Hit the Wall established the darker indie folk side of the project. Look at My Life, co-produced by Dan Nigro, pushed the sound into a more energetic indie-tronica space. Importantly, these weren't random singles, they were chapters. The visual language, the symbolism, the videos, and the recurring Easter eggs all pointed toward the same larger story. And that's the difference between promoting songs and building an era. A song gives you a piece of content. A world gives your audience something to investigate. Gracie Abrams found a way to make a list of songwriting credits more powerful than a traditional advertising campaign. Here's one of the smartest parts of the Daughter from Hell campaign, and it's something that casual listeners might completely miss. The credits themselves became marketing. Look at the creative ecosystem surrounding this album. Aaron Dessner of The National co-wrote a huge portion of the project. Bryce Dessner contributed to the production. Justin Vernon of Bon Iver appears within the creative world of the record. Marcus Mumford contributes vocals. And then there's Paul Mescal. Paul Mescal is credited as a co-writer on Imaginary Friend. From a purely musical perspective, that's interesting, but from a marketing perspective, it's gold. Because suddenly you have a mystery. Fans want to know why Paul Mescal is involved. What does he contribute? How did they work together? What does this mean? And every time someone asks that question, Gracie Abrams stays in the cultural conversation. This is an important distinction. Collaborations don't always need to be designed to create a viral single. Sometimes their job is to create credibility, curiosity, or cultural association. Aaron Dessner connects Gracie to an alternative, critically respected songwriting world. Justin Vernon connects her to another generation of indie credibility. Marcus Mumford adds another layer of live and roots-oriented musical legitimacy, and Paul Mescal brings an entirely different cultural audience into the conversation. So the collaboration strategy wasn't simply, let's get famous people on the album. It was, who can expand the meaning of Gracie Abrams? And that's a much more sophisticated A&R question. The result is that Gracie becomes harder to categorize. She isn't simply a pop singer. She isn't simply an indie singer-songwriter. She isn't simply Taylor Swift's former opener. She becomes the center of an ecosystem that includes alternative music, pop culture, film, fashion, and songwriting, and that ambiguity is incredibly valuable. Gracie Abrams got criticized for Daughter from Hell, and that might have been one of the best things that could happen to the campaign. Now, here's where this rollout gets even more interesting. Gracie Abrams' team was simultaneously building two seemingly opposite narratives. On one side, prestige, fashion, beauty, major cultural events, high-profile editorial coverage. Gracie was positioned within the same aspirational ecosystem as major fashion and beauty brands, reinforcing the idea that she wasn't simply an emerging musician. She was becoming a broader cultural figure. But on the other side, the album itself was allowed to be divisive, and this is where a lot of marketing teams get scared. They see a negative review and immediately want to correct the narrative. They want to explain the album, they want to defend the artist, they want to convince everyone that the critics are wrong. But sometimes criticism is actually evidence that people are paying attention. If everyone says an album is fine, nobody has a reason to talk about it. But if critics are arguing about whether the production is too dark, too understated, too repetitive, or too emotionally heavy, suddenly there is a conversation. And Gracie's core audience has something to defend. That creates one of the strongest psychological dynamics in fandom: us versus them. The critics doesn't understand us. The mainstream audience doesn't understand us, but we understand Gracie. That emotional bond can be far more powerful than a perfect review score. And that is particularly important for an artist like Gracie because her biggest competitive advantage isn't spectacle. It's intimacy. If you're an artist or label watching Gracie Abrams, don't copy the aesthetic, copy the strategy. So what can artists, managers, and labels actually take from the Daughter from Hell campaign? Lesson number 1. Own your narrative tags. Every artist has something the public talks about before they even talk about the music. It could be your background, your previous era, your genre, your appearance, your relationships, or even an old mistake. Don't spend your entire career trying to make people forget it. Find a way to turn it into meaning. Gracie took the word daughter, a label that could have been used to define her privilege, and transform it into the title of one of the biggest artistic statements of her career. Lesson number 2. Build emotional pipelines, not just promotional campaigns. Every time you create attention, there should be somewhere for that attention to go. A teaser should lead somewhere. A billboard should lead somewhere. A TikTok should live somewhere. A live performance should lead somewhere, whether it's a pre-save, a stream, an email list, a ticket sale, a merch purchase, or simply deeper fandom. You need to design the next step. And lesson number 3. Build infrastructure, not just moments. Virality is a moment, a career is infrastructure. The goal isn't to create one TikTok that gets 20 million views. The goal is to create an artist identity that still makes sense after the TikTok disappears. That means strong songwriting, strong collaborators, a recognizable visual world, consistent storytelling, strategic partnerships, and a fan base that feels emotionally invested. That's what Gracie Abrams' campaign understood. Gracie Abrams didn't win by becoming louder, she won by becoming more specific, and that might be the biggest music marketing lesson of 2026. Ultimately, Daughter from Hell shows us that modern music marketing isn't always about chasing the biggest possible audience. Sometimes it's about building the deepest possible relationship with the audience you already have, and then giving that relationship enough cultural credibility to grow. Gracie Abrams took criticism, family, history, vulnerability, alternate songwriting, fashion, collaborations, streaming technology, and physical fandom and connected all of those pieces into one coherent story. And that's why this campaign matters, because the real product wasn't just the album. The product was Gracie Abrams as an artist. For labels, the lesson is to stop thinking about campaigns as a series of promotional tasks and start thinking about them as systems. For artists, the lesson is even simpler. Don't build your career around what the algorithm wants you to be. Build the world that people want to enter, because virality can introduce you, but identity is what makes people stay. And if you're an artist, manager, or music marketer, subscribe to LabelGrid for more breakdowns of the strategies happening behind the biggest releases in music. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on our next one. Bye!